I'm Emily, 34, married to David, 36, and mom to our 9-year-old daughter Lily. We live in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone knows each other's business and family gatherings feel like a community event. Most weekends we find ourselves at someone's barbecue or birthday party, and our house is usually filled with the hum of neighbors stopping by to chat. From the outside, it looks like the perfect picture of a calm, close family. David's mother, Margaret, is a constant presence in that picture. She keeps a spotless home that looks ready for a magazine photo shoot at any hour. Her hair is always set in a perfect wave, and every outfit is color-coordinated down to the earrings. Margaret takes pride in appearances, not just her own but everyone's around her, which sounds harmless until you live with it. She notices every detail: wrinkled shirts, scuffed shoes, hair out of place, and she lets you know when something doesn't meet her silent standards. From the start, Margaret's attention turned to me. I'm a jeans and sneakers type of person. I work from home as a freelance designer, so my wardrobe is built for comfort. Margaret never said anything cruel outright, but her comments carried a polished edge. At Sunday dinners, she'd glance at my sneakers and remark that a nice blouse and heels can lift the mood. I smiled and brushed it off, but the message was always there. I should dress to impress, as she put it once when she thought I couldn't hear. It didn't take long for her focus to shift to Lily. Our daughter is full of energy, happiest running in the yard with a soccer ball, or sprawled across the living room floor drawing colorful worlds in her sketchbook. She wears what makes her comfortable: soft leggings, bright t-shirts, and her hair left natural in springy curls that bounce when she laughs. David and I love her free spirit and want her to feel proud of it. Margaret, however, saw Lily's style as a project. She'd suggest frilly dresses for proper family photos, or hint that Lily's curls would look so much more polished if we straightened them. At first, we corrected her gently. We explained that Lily's style is her own choice, and that we support it. Margaret would smile and say she understood, but the suggestions kept coming. During a Sunday dinner a few weeks ago, she leaned over to Lily and said she would be stunning if she looked more refined. Lily's fork paused mid-air and her eyes darted to mine. I felt the air tighten around the table. David calmly told his mother that Lily's look was perfect as it was. Margaret waved a hand and changed the subject, but I saw Lily's shoulders shrink. The tension grew sharper when the school announced an upcoming spring concert. Margaret immediately started talking about finding the perfect dress for Lily. I told her we'd let Lily choose, and if she wanted to wear her favorite jersey, that was fine. Margaret pursed her lips and said, "Every young lady needs at least one fancy dress for a big occasion." I held my ground. Lily was excited about the concert and planned to wear a bright blue shirt with glittery sneakers. That was the end of it, or so I thought. A few days later, Margaret offered to babysit Lily while David and I attended a late work event. She volunteered with a cheerful smile, claiming she wanted to give us a night out. Normally I appreciate her help, but something in her eagerness made me pause. I hesitated, remembering her comments and the way she had ignored boundaries before. Still, David and I had an important client meeting we couldn't miss. Against my gut feeling, I agreed. Before the weekend, I sat with Lily and reminded her that she never had to change for anyone, not even Grandma. She nodded and went back to her drawings, but I saw the small furrow in her brow. David called his mother that night and firmly reminded her to respect Lily's choices. Margaret laughed, a light sound that didn't match the tension in my chest, and said, "Of course, dear, you worry too much." The day before the babysitting, Margaret sent a message in the family group chat. It's so important to guide children the right way before it's too late. No names mentioned, but we knew the meaning. David raised an eyebrow, and I felt a cold certainty settle in. We both knew we'd have to watch this carefully. I told myself I might be overthinking it, that Margaret just liked to talk. But deep down I felt the line we had drawn was about to be tested. I made a quiet promise that if she crossed it again, there would be consequences she wouldn't forget. I'm Emily. And the next Saturday came faster than I expected. David and I had a late afternoon client event that would stretch into the evening, so we packed Lily's overnight bag and drove to Margaret's house around 3. The sun was bright, and the neighborhood was busy with kids riding bikes and neighbors mowing lawns. Margaret opened her door with a wide smile, her living room already smelling faintly of lavender polish. She greeted Lily with a hug and ushered her inside like a hostess welcoming a guest to a grand party. Before we left, I gave a gentle reminder. I handed over Lily's small duffel with pajamas, a favorite stuffed bunny, and a few snacks. I looked at Margaret and said Lily had everything she needed and that we wanted her to stay just as she was. Margaret touched my arm lightly, her nails perfectly manicured, and answered with an easy of course and a bright laugh. David met my eyes over her shoulder. We both heard the promise but didn't relax. We drove to our event downtown and checked in at the hotel conference room. The gathering ran long. A last-minute issue with a presentation kept us talking with clients much later than we planned. I texted Margaret around 6 to check in. No reply. At 7 I sent another quick message. Still nothing. David tried calling at 8, but it went to voicemail. We assumed they were busy with dinner, or maybe Lily was showing her a new drawing and Margaret left her phone on silent. By the time we headed home, it was nearly 10. The quiet suburban streets glowed under soft streetlights as we pulled into the driveway. I unlocked the door expecting to find Margaret and Lily in the den watching a movie. Instead, the house felt oddly still. The faint sound of music floated from the hallway. I stepped into the living room and froze. Lily stood in the center of the room wearing a tight, glittery silver dress that didn't belong to her. Her springy curls were gone. Her hair lay flat and shiny, a chemical smell hanging in the air. Her small face looked blotchy and her eyes were red, like she had been crying. She gripped the hem of the dress and shifted from foot to foot. Margaret emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of lemonade as if nothing were wrong. She smiled with a pride that made the scene feel unreal. She called it a proper little lady look, and admired the way the hair treatment tamed that wild hair. The words landed heavy. David's shoulders stiffened beside me. I stepped forward and asked what happened, my voice steady but sharp. Margaret set down the tray and waved a dismissive hand. She said it was just for fun, and that Lily secretly loved it. Lily's eyes widened, and she shook her head slightly, a silent plea that cut through the room. David stepped beside me and told his mother she had crossed a serious line. His voice carried a firmness that filled the quiet house. I guided Lily upstairs without another word. In the bathroom, I turned on the warm water and helped her out of the stiff dress. She whispered that she never wanted the makeover. Her scalp looked red along the edges where the chemical treatment had been applied. I rinsed her hair carefully, the chemical smell rising as the water ran. She flinched when the water touched a tender spot. I wrapped her in a soft towel and helped her into her favorite pajamas with the tiny stars printed across the fabric. Downstairs, I heard faint movement. David stayed in the kitchen with his mother. When I returned, Margaret was seated stiffly at the table, arms crossed. She repeated that she only wanted Lily to look her best. Her tone carried no understanding of the harm she had done. I told her directly that she would not be babysitting again until she acknowledged that what she did was wrong, and promised never to repeat it. Margaret pressed her lips together and stood without another word. She gathered her purse and keys, the clink of metal loud in the silent kitchen. Without a goodbye, she walked to the door. The sound of it closing behind her echoed through the house. David and I exchanged a long look. The tension felt like a weight pressing against the walls. We locked the door and checked on Lily, who was already curled in bed clutching her bunny. I sat beside her until her breathing softened into sleep. Her natural curls were damp but free, springing back as they dried. Downstairs, the living room looked untouched, except for the faint chemical scent that lingered like a warning. Margaret's absence felt heavy, but the bigger weight was the realization of how far she had gone to impose her will. David started to gather the stray bobby pins and hairspray bottles left on the coffee table. He found a receipt from a salon tucked into a plastic bag. It showed a chemical straightening treatment done earlier that evening. I collected the glittery dress and set it aside to wash later. Its stiff fabric felt like a symbol of everything we had warned against. David picked up the salon receipt again and shook his head. We both understood that this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Margaret had planned it. We cleaned quietly, the soft sounds of dishes and running water filling the space. Outside, the street lamps cast long shadows across the lawn. I glanced at the family group chat on my phone. Margaret had already posted a cheerful message about what a lovely evening she had with her granddaughter. No mention of the makeover. No sign of regret. When the house finally settled into silence, I sat at the kitchen table and thought about the next step. Margaret had ignored every boundary and every warning. She believed she had done nothing wrong, even after seeing Lily's tears. I knew we couldn't leave this as a simple argument. The lesson had to be clear and unforgettable. As the clock ticked past midnight, I wrote a few notes in a small notebook, listing the details of the evening, the unanswered texts, the salon receipt, the chemical smell, the red eyes. Each point was a reminder that this wasn't just about a dress or a hairstyle, it was about respect. David joined me, resting a hand on the table. We didn't need to speak. The plan forming in my mind wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure Margaret understood that Lily's choices were hers alone, and that crossing that line again would not be allowed. The house finally quieted to the steady rhythm of night. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully with her curls drying back into their natural shape. Downstairs, the faint scent of chemicals lingered as a sharp reminder of the night's events. I closed the notebook, knowing this was only the beginning of what needed to be done to protect our daughter's freedom to be herself. The morning after the disastrous babysitting night, the house was quiet except for the sound of birds outside the kitchen window. I woke before sunrise, already certain of what I needed to do. Margaret had crossed every line we set, and words alone hadn't stopped her before. This time, the message had to be unmistakable. David joined me at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. We went over the details of last night, the unanswered texts, the salon receipt, the smell of chemicals still clinging to the living room. He listened as I explained an idea that had taken root while I was writing in my notebook. It wasn't about shouting or another tense confrontation. It was about letting Margaret experience what Lily had gone through, but in a way no one could ignore. David thought for a moment, then gave a slow nod. He knew exactly which event would set the stage. Margaret's charity luncheon was coming up in a few days. It was the highlight of her social calendar every spring, filled with local reporters, photographers, and a guest list packed with people she loved to impress. She would never miss it, and every year she dressed with the care of someone walking a red carpet. If there was ever a place where appearance mattered to her, that luncheon was it. I picked up my phone and called Margaret mid-morning. The ring lasted only a moment before she answered in her usual bright tone. I told her I wanted to help her look fabulous for the luncheon, like a peace gesture after our tense night. There was a brief pause, then a burst of enthusiasm. She sounded delighted, almost relieved, believing we were smoothing things over. She said she would love that, and suggested we shop together the next day. I agreed and set a time. The next morning, David kissed me goodbye at the door and wished me luck. Lily was already at school, so I drove to Margaret's house. She greeted me warmly, wearing a soft blue sweater and pearls, her usual calm and polished self. We headed to a large downtown boutique known for dramatic, high-fashion outfits. Inside, I made a point to pick bold, unexpected pieces. Bright neon suits, oversized jewelry, shoes with glittered heels. I encouraged her to try them, telling her they would make her stand out in all the right ways. Margaret laughed at first, hesitant, but my constant praise kept her moving from one rack to another. I held up a vivid neon green suit with sharp shoulders and insisted it was daring yet classy. She twirled in front of the mirror, uncertain, but I clapped and said it looked perfect for the luncheon. We matched it with a chunky necklace of oversized jewels and metallic earrings that shimmered under the store lights. Margaret finally nodded, saying she trusted my taste since I worked in design. I didn't stop at the outfit. On the drive back, I told her I had booked an exclusive salon appointment as a special treat. It was a place known for avant-garde styles and dramatic transformations. Margaret's eyes lit up, flattered by the attention. She agreed without hesitation, clearly touched that I was making an effort. The salon buzzed with upbeat music when we walked in. Stylists with vivid hair colors and creative tattoos greeted us. I explained we wanted something youthful and fashion-forward for an important event. They smiled knowingly. I asked for glitter-streaked highlights and a bold makeup look that would photograph well. Margaret sat in the chair, a little stiff at first, but the staff worked quickly. Bright streaks of silver and purple threaded through her hair while a makeup artist added shimmering eyeshadow and glossy lipstick with flecks of sparkle. When the stylist spun the chair toward the mirror, Margaret's eyes widened. The reflection showed a dramatic, glittering hairstyle and striking makeup far outside her usual classic taste. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but I leaned in and told her she looked amazing, fresh and chic. The stylist added a final mist of shimmering spray, sealing the look. The next day, I picked her up for the luncheon. She wore the neon green suit and the heavy jewelry we had chosen. In the daylight, the colors practically glowed. Her hair caught the sun and threw small sparks of silver and purple. As we entered the venue, camera flashes went off. Guests turned to watch, their expressions a polite mix of surprise and curiosity. Margaret smiled tightly, adjusting her necklace as we moved through the crowd. Throughout the luncheon, people offered careful compliments, their voices neutral. I overheard a few quiet whispers from nearby tables, words like unexpected and bold choice floating through the air. Photographers snapped pictures, the flashes catching every glint of glitter in her hair. Margaret kept her posture straight, but I noticed her fingers fidget with the edge of the neon jacket. After the event ended, we walked to the car in the warm afternoon light. Margaret finally let out a slow breath, glancing at the reflections in the building's glass windows. She looked at me, searching for something in my face. I kept my tone calm and steady as I explained the reason behind everything. I told her this was how Lily felt the night she came home, in a dress she never chose, with hair that smelled of chemicals and a style that wasn't hers. Margaret stood silent for a long moment. The breeze lifted a streak of silver hair across her face. Her eyes softened as the meaning settled in. She nodded once, slow and deliberate, understanding without argument. The lesson had landed without a single raised voice. We drove back quietly. The bright outfit and glittering hair seemed less like fashion statements and more like symbols now. When I dropped her at her house, she reached for my arm, a gentle squeeze that said more than words. I simply returned the gesture and wished her a good evening. Later that night, I uploaded the photos from the luncheon that the local paper had already posted online. Margaret stood in the center of each picture, a burst of color and sparkle among the neutral suits and dresses around her. Comments under the article were polite but filled with curious questions about her daring new style. I saved a few of the photos, not to embarrass her, but as a reminder of the day's quiet lesson. At home, David listened as I described every detail. Lily was in the living room, drawing a new scene in her sketchbook, her natural curls bouncing as she leaned over the paper. The house smelled of dinner and warm bread. David smiled faintly, understanding that we hadn't just reacted. We had shown Margaret exactly what it felt like to be forced into someone else's idea of perfection. By the end of the evening, Margaret sent a single message to the family group chat. Had an eye-opening day. Thank you, Emily. No explanation, just that short note. It said everything. The change wouldn't be instant, but she now understood the boundary that words alone had never made clear. As I turned off the lights for the night, the house settled into a calm that felt different from the one before. Lily's laughter drifted from her room, bright and unrestrained, a sound that promised the freedom to stay exactly who she wanted to be. Several quiet days followed the charity luncheon. Margaret, who usually sent cheerful morning messages or called to share small neighborhood news, stayed silent. No texts, no calls, not even a quick emoji in the family group chat. The sudden pause felt strange after years of her daily check-ins, but the house settled into an easy rhythm. Lily filled her afternoons with sketching and soccer practice, while David and I worked through our usual routines. By midweek, the neighborhood buzzed with talk about the luncheon. At the farmer's market, two neighbors mentioned the neon green suit and glitter-streaked hair, calling it the boldest look anyone had seen at a town charity event. At Lily's school drop-off, another parent whispered about the unexpected makeover that had become the talk of the week. I smiled politely and kept moving, letting the chatter swirl without adding to it. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the trees and Lily worked on a new art project, David and I cleaned up dinner dishes together. He glanced toward the window and asked if the makeover lesson might have gone too far. He worried it could have embarrassed his mother more than intended. I reminded him of the night Lily came home in that sparkly dress, with straightened hair and eyes red from tears. David nodded quietly, drying a plate, understanding why the point had to be made. The following evening brought an unexpected knock at the door. When I opened it, Margaret stood on the porch wearing a simple gray cardigan and holding a small clutch. Her usual sparkle was gone. She stepped inside with a cautious air, greeting David first and glancing toward the living room where Lily's laughter floated from the hallway. We settled in the kitchen, the scent of baked bread still lingering from dinner. Margaret started with a quiet apology for the salon spectacle, saying she never expected the stylist to go so far with the glitter and bold colors. Her voice stayed measured, as if testing the ground. I listened, then calmly pointed out that the luncheon makeover wasn't the real issue. Lily's night with her hair chemically straightened against every boundary we set still had no acknowledgement. Margaret paused, her hands folding together. She said she only wanted Lily to look her best, her words careful but still avoiding a direct apology. David leaned forward, his tone firm but even. He told his mother that until she acknowledged Lily's right to her own appearance, visits would remain limited. The room held a stillness that made every sound, clock ticks, refrigerator hum, stand out. Margaret glanced down at her clasped hands, then suggested a family dinner later in the week to talk things over, hoping to reset the mood. She looked toward the hallway, but Lily had stayed in her room, focused on her drawing. After Margaret left, we went upstairs and explained the dinner plan to Lily. She set down her colored pencil and said she wasn't ready to see her grandmother yet. Her voice stayed steady, but her decision was clear. David and I agreed without hesitation. We told her we would attend the dinner alone, keeping her comfort the priority. The night of the dinner arrived with a light drizzle that left the streets shining under the lamps. David and I drove to a quiet family restaurant that Margaret had chosen. She was already seated when we arrived, her outfit simple and classic, a sharp contrast to the neon green suit from the luncheon. She greeted us politely, ordering tea as we settled in. Conversation began with safe topics, the weather, a new bakery opening downtown, but I redirected gently to the matter at hand. Margaret hesitated, her eyes flicking to the teacup in front of her. The restaurant's soft music filled the space while she searched for words. Finally, she grew quiet, realizing how deep the harm had run. She spoke more slowly, admitting that she hadn't thought about how powerless Lily must have felt. She said she wanted to make things right, and asked for a few days to prepare a proper apology to her granddaughter. We left the restaurant under a clearing sky. The air smelled of wet pavement and blooming flowers. Back home, we found Lily curled on the couch with a blanket and her sketchbook. We explained that Margaret planned to visit soon and apologize, but only when Lily felt ready. We told her nothing would move forward without her choice. Lily nodded and returned to her drawing, the faint scratch of pencil on paper filling the calm room. The house settled into a comfortable quiet as the evening wore on. Outside, the drizzle ended, and a cool breeze slipped through the open window. Inside, we knew the next step would belong to Lily, and that Margaret now understood the importance of waiting for her granddaughter's consent. Margaret called midweek to confirm a time to visit. She asked for a quiet Saturday afternoon, promising she wanted to speak with Lily and make things right. I agreed and set the day aside. That Saturday, the house felt calm and bright. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows while Lily worked on a new drawing at the kitchen table. I set out her favorite snacks, apple slices with caramel dip and small bowls of popcorn, and turned on soft acoustic music to keep the atmosphere easy. David checked the living room, arranging a few pillows on the couch so everyone could sit comfortably. Just after 2, the doorbell rang. Margaret stood on the porch without her usual bold accessories. She wore a simple cream sweater and carried a small gift bag decorated with watercolor flowers. Her expression was careful but warm. She stepped inside, greeting David first, then looking toward Lily with a gentle smile. We all moved to the living room. Margaret took a seat on the couch, placing the gift bag on the coffee table. The soft music filled the pause before she began. She looked directly at Lily and admitted she had acted without listening to what Lily wanted. Her voice stayed steady, but the words carried a weight that settled in the room. Lily held her sketchbook close and watched quietly. Margaret continued, offering a clear apology for making her uncomfortable and ignoring her choices. She said she understood now that the makeover night had taken away Lily's say in how she looked, and that it was wrong. Lily set her sketchbook aside and spoke softly. She explained that she likes wearing the clothes she chooses and wants to keep her hair natural. Her curls bounced slightly as she nodded for emphasis. Margaret listened without interrupting, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Margaret promised that Lily's style belonged only to her, and that she would never try to change it again. She said she would respect Lily's choices from now on, no matter the occasion. The quiet confidence in her words filled the room with a new kind of calm. She then reached for the small gift bag and handed it to Lily. Inside was a large sketchbook with thick, bright pages and a set of colored pencils arranged in a rainbow of shades. Margaret said it was for creating anything Lily wanted, with no rules or instructions. Lily's eyes widened as she pulled out the pencils, their sharpened tips catching the light. Lily hesitated for a moment, then smiled and accepted the gift. She thanked her grandmother in a soft voice and flipped open the sketchbook to the first blank page. The tension that had hovered for weeks began to ease as she placed a green pencil to the paper and started a simple drawing. I watched the scene unfold, noticing how Lily's shoulders relaxed and her movements grew more playful. David leaned forward and thanked his mother for understanding why boundaries mattered. He spoke with quiet certainty, making it clear how much this change meant for Lily's comfort. I gently reminded everyone that Lily's feelings must remain the priority. Margaret nodded in agreement, her eyes following the lines Lily sketched across the page. The gentle acoustic music mixed with the soft scratch of colored pencils, a small soundtrack to the moment. Margaret asked if she could draw too. Lily slid a piece of paper toward her and chose a purple pencil for her. David joined in, selecting a blue pencil. We spent the next hour together at the coffee table, sketching small scenes and laughing at our uneven shapes. The living room filled with easy conversation about colors, favorite animals, and silly doodles. As the afternoon stretched on, Margaret paused and looked around the room. She spoke quietly about learning to let go of control and how she was beginning to understand the importance of individuality. She said she wanted to be a grandmother who encouraged, not one who tried to mold. When the visit came to an end, Margaret placed her drawing next to Lily's on the table. Lily stood, and after a small pause, stepped forward for a hug. Margaret wrapped her arms around her granddaughter with a gentle warmth that felt genuine. The long embrace carried more meaning than words could. David walked Margaret to the door, thanking her again for coming and for listening. The late afternoon sun lit the porch as she left, her simple cream sweater glowing softly in the light. Lily waved from the living room window, her curls catching the sunlight as she smiled. The house settled into a quiet contentment after she left. The colored pencils lay scattered across the coffee table. The sketchbook opened to fresh drawings. It was the kind of calm that follows a hard conversation, finally handled the right way, a moment that signaled real progress and a new start for all of us. The weeks after Margaret's visit moved by with a calm rhythm. Each day felt easier as everyone settled into a new routine where boundaries stayed clear and respect guided every interaction. Mornings started with quiet breakfasts and afternoons with Lily sketching at the kitchen table, her curls bouncing as she leaned over new drawings. Margaret kept her promise, never once sending a message about Lily's clothes or hair, and the absence of those comments was noticeable. The first real family test came with a cousin's birthday party 2 weekends later. The backyard filled with balloons and the smell of grilled food. Kids raced around with slices of cake, and adults gathered under a string of lights. Lily wore her favorite soccer jersey and bright sneakers, hair loose and natural. Margaret arrived carrying a cheerful gift bag and greeted everyone warmly. When she saw Lily, she smiled and complimented the sporty outfit without suggesting any changes. The simple remark drew a small but important look of relief from David across the yard. Neighbors who had seen the charity luncheon photos now noticed something different. At the party, 2 of them mentioned how considerate Margaret seemed these days. One even commented that she seemed lighter, more relaxed. Margaret only laughed softly and shifted the conversation to Lily's latest art project. The following weekend, Margaret called with an invitation to the local farmers market. She made sure to tell me it was entirely Lily's choice to join. Lily listened as I relayed the invite, and after a pause, nodded with a small smile. She packed a folder with her newest sketches to share if she felt like it. Saturday morning dawned bright and breezy. We met Margaret near the market entrance where stalls overflowed with fresh fruit, flowers, and handmade crafts. The air smelled of baked bread and ripe strawberries. Margaret greeted Lily with a gentle hug and asked which stands she wanted to see first. Lily led the way toward a booth filled with colorful ribbons and hair ties. Margaret offered to buy her a set and told her to pick every color she liked. Lily carefully chose a rainbow of shades while Margaret paid and thanked the vendor. They walked side by side through the market, talking about school projects and weekend plans. Margaret asked about Lily's soccer practice and which art piece she was most excited to finish next, steering clear of any mention of appearance. We browsed stalls selling honey, handmade candles, and fresh pastries, enjoying the easy pace. Later, back at home, David listened to our stories about the market. He noticed the change too, remarking that his mother seemed to have made a lasting shift. It wasn't just a temporary effort, it felt real. A week later, Margaret invited us over for a casual dinner. When we arrived, we found one of Lily's drawings framed and hanging prominently in the living room. The sketch showed a bright meadow with a winding river, its colors vivid and joyful. Visitors that evening admired the artwork, and Margaret proudly pointed to Lily's signature in the corner, highlighting her granddaughter's creativity with genuine pride. As more family gatherings came and went, the difference in Margaret's attitude became clear to everyone. Conversations with her focused on school events, new recipes, and local news. She celebrated Lily's small victories, like a high score on a math test or a completed art piece, without a single comment about clothes or hair. One evening, Margaret joined us for a simple dinner at our house. Over roasted vegetables and pasta, she shared a funny story about a bold outfit she wore decades ago, complete with shoulder pads and glitter. She laughed at her own past fashion missteps, and even Lily giggled as Margaret described the bright colors and big earrings. It was lighthearted and warm, a moment of self-awareness that would have felt impossible a few months earlier. Spring arrived in full bloom, and we decided to host an outdoor picnic to celebrate. We set up tables under the tall oak trees in the backyard and invited family and a few close neighbors. Margaret arrived in comfortable linen pants and a soft pastel shirt, carrying a basket of homemade lemon bars. Lily wore her favorite shorts and a t-shirt she had decorated with fabric paint. The afternoon filled with laughter, soccer games on the lawn, and the smell of fresh flowers drifting from the garden. Margaret helped Lily hang her newest sketches on a string near the picnic tables so everyone could admire them. Guests walked along the display, offering kind words about the colorful drawings. Margaret beamed with quiet pride, making sure everyone saw Lily's work. As the sun lowered and the picnic wound down, I looked around at the easy interactions. Margaret chatted with neighbors, Lily played with cousins, and David manned the grill, all without a single tense moment. The simple scene carried more weight than any long talk ever could. The respect we fought for months earlier now felt natural, woven into every conversation and gesture. When the last guest left and the yard grew quiet, I stood with David near the garden. We watched Lily chase fireflies across the grass while Margaret packed leftover food into containers. The evening air was warm and filled with the soft sound of crickets. It was clear that the family had reached a steady place where everyone's boundaries were honored and individuality celebrated. That night, as we cleaned up, I thought about how conflict, handled with patience and a bit of creativity, had strengthened our family instead of breaking it. Margaret's journey from control to respect had transformed not just her relationship with Lily, but the entire family dynamic. Lily now called her grandmother on her own to share school accomplishments or funny stories, something she hadn't done for months. The changes were not dramatic scenes or sudden shifts, but a series of small, consistent actions, each one proving that understanding had replaced tension. It was the kind of progress that lasts, built quietly and steadily, until it feels like it has always been there. By the time we turned out the lights and locked the doors, the house felt peaceful. Lily's laughter from earlier still seemed to echo in the rooms. The path to this point had been anything but simple, yet standing in the quiet kitchen with David, I knew the family now rested on mutual respect and a shared understanding that would carry us forward. By the first warm days of summer, our household had found a comfortable rhythm. Windows stayed open to let in the scent of cut grass, and evenings ended with the sound of crickets instead of tense conversations. Margaret continued to keep every promise she had made, never offering a single comment about clothes, hair, or how anyone looked. The quiet respect wove itself into each week like a natural part of life. To welcome the new season, David and I planned a relaxed neighborhood barbecue. We invited family, friends, and a few neighbors who had followed the earlier drama through whispers and curious glances. On the morning of the gathering, Lily bounced around the kitchen, helping arrange platters of fruit, while the grill heated outside. She wore her favorite soccer jersey and shorts, her curls shining in the early sun. She picked the outfit without a moment's hesitation, a small but steady sign of her confidence. Guests began to arrive as the afternoon warmed. Laughter and greetings filled the yard, and the smell of marinated vegetables drifted from the grill. Margaret walked up the driveway wearing light linen pants, a pale yellow blouse, and a wide sun hat that shaded her face. She carried a basket of homemade lemon bars and greeted Lily with a cheerful hug that felt natural and easy. The hug lingered just long enough to show genuine warmth. Instead of the old remarks about clothes or hair, Margaret asked about Lily's recent soccer practice and the new art projects she had been working on. Lily launched into a description of her latest drawing series while Margaret listened closely, nodding with interest. Their conversation blended into the sounds of neighbors chatting and children laughing near the swing set. Throughout the afternoon, Margaret moved from group to group, talking with guests about summer plans and local events. She asked a neighbor about their new garden, offered to share her recipe for lemon bars, and laughed at a story from one of David's coworkers. Not once did she mention anyone's appearance. It was as though the old habits had simply fallen away. I had decorated the patio with several of Lily's drawings, clipping them to a string that ran along the fence. Bright sketches of rivers, forests, and abstract swirls of color fluttered gently in the breeze. Margaret guided a pair of neighbors along the display, pointing out details in each piece with proud explanations of Lily's technique. The neighbors complimented the artwork and quietly told me they had noticed how considerate Margaret had become since the charity luncheon. Their words carried a note of genuine respect, a recognition of change that others could see without being told. As the grill sizzled and the smell of grilled corn filled the yard, David stood beside me with a quiet smile. He leaned closer and thanked me for guiding the family toward understanding instead of resentment. The comment was simple but filled with meaning. We both watched as Margaret joined Lily and a group of kids for a casual lawn game, laughing and cheering as if she were just another teammate. Later in the evening, when the sun cast a golden glow across the yard, Margaret approached Lily with a small gift bag. Inside was a delicate silver charm bracelet engraved with a single word, shine. Margaret explained that it was meant to celebrate Lily's creativity and independence, a reminder to always stay bright in her own way. Lily examined the bracelet, the metal catching the last rays of sunlight, then slipped it onto her wrist and hugged her grandmother with a happy grin. The hug carried no hesitation, only comfort and pride in the bond they were rebuilding. As twilight settled, I raised a glass to thank everyone for supporting one another and for respecting boundaries that allowed each person to be fully themselves. The group responded with warm smiles and a gentle clink of glasses. The moment felt like a quiet acknowledgement of how far the family had come. While guests lingered around the fire pit, Margaret walked over to me for a private word. She looked out at the yard where Lily chased fireflies and said she was grateful for the lesson that had helped her see how important self-expression was for her granddaughter. Her voice held steady, carrying both humility and sincerity. I nodded, accepting the quiet truth of her words. The evening ended with stories shared around the fire pit. Flames crackled as laughter rose into the soft night air. Children roasted marshmallows, while adults recounted funny memories from past summers. Margaret joined every conversation with easy humor, her earlier need for control replaced by a genuine enjoyment of the moment. When the last guests drifted home and the fire burned low, the yard settled into peaceful silence. Lily stretched out on a blanket with her new bracelet catching the moonlight, while Margaret helped gather empty plates without a single remark about appearances or expectations. It was a simple night filled with warmth, proof that change can last when it's built on respect and patience. The barbecue closed a chapter in our family story not with dramatic endings but with small consistent actions that showed lasting growth. Margaret's transformation wasn't just a phase or a polite act for show, it had become a natural part of who she was. Our family moved forward together, not in tension but in steady trust, each person free to shine in their own way.